Dense versus non-dense atmosphere contrast. What is it and how is it created? Often you'll find that dense atmosphere looks smoky and has a lower contrast level. This is because the air contains a concentration of some dense substance. This can be things like dust, aerosols, or glycerin smoke. In this tutorial, I will show you examples of contrast of dense versus non-dense by using glycerin smoke. The backlight on this set came from the ACE 650 watt lights. Now, let's make contrast of dense and non-dense atmosphere within this scene. I'm filling the background of the room with haze. I use a simple 800 watt smoke machine. I filled the space in the background with smoke, which, as you can see, increases the contrast in the scene. Exposure and shadows are bright, so that the smoke is not so thick and dense. I disperse it by any means at hand. I don't like to leave the smoke in the atmosphere like this. If you want to create the effect of contrast via dense atmosphere and not smoke caused by a fire, you will have to wait a little, so that all the smoke will settle and decrease in density. Smoke machine fluid has different densities and textures. To create a light and long hang time haze, I use the liquid with no texture and the highest density. The denser the smoke is, the longer it will take to disappear. Textured smoke machine liquids produce smoke similar to that of a cigarette or a fire, which is often not ideal for the effect I am chasing. This looks very hazy, because I added a lot of haze in the scene. I will just wait until the haze settles a little. Volumetric lighting is light travelling through a space, so we see beams of light. Volumetric lighting can turn your 2D image into a much more cinematic 3D image. Hard light works best in achieving this, as it creates intense, sharp beams. The Fresnel ACE 650 watt is a hard light source. If I used an LED source, I will not get sharp beams, and instead, I'd probably get a soft glow and bloom in the haze. For beams of light and dense versus not dense contrast, the haze from the smoke machine works best due to its subtlety. It hangs in the air longer than dirt, dust, and smoke. In this scene, I have two light sources. These are the Godox 5600 Kelvin LED light, which has a cool color temperature, and the ACE 650 watt Fresnel lamp, which has a warm color temperature. You can see the difference of the temperatures. And you're right if you think to yourself that this light set looks a little fake. Let's remember, the main principle of lighting a set is that we have to motivate all artificial light. I want to put the light sources in the scene to imitate sunlight from the window. The viewer should think that the location has a window on the left. With this in mind, let's try to make this scene a little more natural. So that the daylight from the window does not fall on the character, I'm putting blackout material near the main character. When you use haze, all lighting sources will become visible. I want to move the ACE lamp, which stays upstairs and more to the left. If I decide that lighting in the scene is the light of the sun, I have to have one big source. But two light sources can still be made to look like one if I set the rays of the sources parallel to each other. And of course, the temperatures of all the light sources have to be the same too. Therefore, I used a warm gel filter on the Godox LED light source to warm it up from its 5600 Kelvin temperature. The light will be aimed at the wall to fill in the background space. In fact, this scene can have a number of different lighting setups, but in this instance, I'm setting the lighting up to ensure I'm achieving light and shadow contrast, as well as the contrast of atmosphere density. The more parallel the light is, the sharper the shadows are. It's best not to put this kind of light in frame, as it will just flood the particles in the air and wash out your image. Also, don't put this light with haze behind the camera. For volumetric light with dense atmosphere, it's best to work with backlight, key light and silhouette techniques. Also, when there is haze, saturation, contrast and details are usually a little bit lower. As a result of this, you can also get overexposure in the camera, so I tend to lower the exposure in the camera to cater for this. Remember, you don't always have to haze everywhere within the scene. Divide your scene into backgrounds and foregrounds, and add smoke only where you want to get contrast of dense and non-dense atmosphere. For contrast of dense and non-dense atmosphere, you have to try to blow out the haze from the foreground. You don't need too many hazes. It is enough to use dense and light glycerin in the air of the background area. You've probably seen this effect of volumetric light in the movies. So this is made from haze and backlit sources. When the place has been filled with haze, you can set the light source that are directed towards the camera, which will give you volumetric light. When the location has been filled with haze, you can set your lighting source directed towards the camera, which will give you volumetric light. If the light source has diffusion, you will see a more smooth volume of the light. You can also cut this light with flags to get more intense and sharp beams of light. When somebody asks me, what smoke machine do you prefer? I always answer that it depends. Generally, the more powerful the machine is, the better. If I use a low power hazer, I can't fill big spaces with haze. Low power smoke machines also take a very long time to heat up. I always recommend to choose a smoke machine or hazer that has a power of no less than 800 watts. On projects with good budgets, I tend to take haze machines. These hazers can generate haze and work all day, filling the space consistently and constantly with very subtle haze. Also, the haze machines are more flexible as they can work with different power levels and haze density. As I said, it is better to light toward the camera. It is generally a bad idea to use fill light with dense atmosphere. Beams and light volume looks better with backlight, silhouette and background light. If you direct fill light from behind the camera in dense air, the image will usually look flat. Optical contrast. We have arrived at the final kind of contrast, and I will not dwell on it for a long time, since we all know about it and we all use it. I will say one thing. Opening the aperture does not make your shot attractive. Look at professional shots from films, and in 90% of the cases, you will see that the aperture is most often closed. I know that it is a very simple tool to work with contrast, but I recommend using it as a final step when working with contrast. Don't make it a bad habit. Don't shoot with the aperture open all the time.